Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Raising the New Earth podcast. Hey, Brooke.
Hi, Noah.
Today we have Julie Dean with us. Julie Dean is the founder of Twin Cities Mussar. She supports the growing citywide Mussar learning initiatives across Minneapolis-St. Paul area. She initiated a partnership with Jay Pride to create the nation's first dedicated queer Mussar group, serving Jewish members of the LGBTQ plus community. She's also the creator of an ongoing curriculum called The Soul of Leadership. She provides international training for the lead facilitators of the Mussar Institute, and she leads women's spirituality groups. Welcome to the podcast, Julie.
Hello, thank you. It's very good to be with you both.
We're so happy you're with us. So tell us, what is Mussar?
Okay, well, Mussar is a really exciting pathway in the Jewish tradition of personal growth for the sake of a better world. The idea that each one of us has the ability to make a difference in how we respond to the different things that happen in life. And so with Mussar, it is both a body of study, there's texts and learning, and it's also a series of practices to help us cultivate our inner life. It's the idea of waking up, which we hear in a variety of different modalities and different kinds of inner work that's happening now, very much in our contemporary society. And Judaism has an authentic pathway that goes back very far in our tradition of applying Jewish wisdom to our lives so that it's practical and relevant and helps us have agency over how we show up, and that it's an ongoing practice for our whole lives.
So something that Brooke asked when we were planning for this episode, do you have to be Jewish to practice Mussar? And does the establishment that you bring it into have to be Jewish?
No, you don't have to be Jewish to practice Mussar. The establishment doesn't have to be Jewish. It's a body of work from a world wisdom tradition. And so it can be, it's really more about the intention of what someone wants to do with it in their lives. There's Jewish wisdom, which is just, it's very exciting to bring this forward because the formative Mussar schools, teachers, and students all perished in the Holocaust. And so we are revitalizing this body of work and these practices now, but you don't have to be Jewish in order to learn it, to practice it. And I think as we go on, I'll share with you more about how there's so many mindfulness practices that are naturally a piece and a part of Mussar. It was really a foundation of a lot of modern psychology as well.
I love that.
Yeah, I think it's that you mentioned like the waking up and kind of where we are just as a whole. And I had never heard of Mussar, but learning about it in preparation for this episode, and just I'm excited to learn more about it today. But one thing that strikes me just in how it, I believe, or I would at least like to hope that I think that people are awakening to this idea that spirituality really comes from within, and that we kind of have always had like world religions, and oftentimes what happens is the dogma just kind of continues on, and that the real connection can oftentimes get lost. And I think that there's this strong desire to find practices that reconnect us to that authentic piece where we can feel something deeper. And I think that with this world of, technology, and, now we're talking a lot about AI and kind of like that lack of connection, that this is like a good, a good place that's showing that we have a place where we can connect back in, and that there's these different ways. And if you want to kind of practice the Jewish tradition but do so in a spiritual way, this is a beautiful practice to do so. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Oh my God, so many things. I look at the two of you and immediately I realize here we are. We're three people living our human lives as best as we can. And that we don't engage too often in conversations about how to do that. How do we live our lives? And how do we do that in a way that's meaningful for ourselves, in a way that's meaningful in our relationships with others? And then if someone has a spiritual practice or a connection to something much greater, then how do we do that? So people talk about it, but we don't engage on a peer-to-peer level about how do you do it? How do we grow? And so to me, dogma says this is what you need to believe. And I was never raised with dogma. In Judaism, there's much more emphasis from my experience on how to act, how to be, some of our ethics and values, which is what Mussar is really focused on. And then there are some core beliefs like that each one of us is a holy soul, that we are, and meaning that each one of us, like there's some inherent goodness in all of us. And so believing that and connecting with that, then I want to try to cultivate my life so that I can bring that forward as much as possible, because I also know how to block that, right? And we all know that, like, for example, you work in an office, a situation happens, let's say there's 8 people in the office, and you see 8 different responses to whatever happened. Some are helpful, some are collaborative, and some are destructive, and some are negative, and they feed into those 2 different feedback loops, right? You really can't be neutral in responding to things. Even taking a pass on something is still making a statement that impacts other people around you. And so by taking ownership of that, then we can cultivate ourselves for change. And in doing that, we're alignment with that idea in Judaism of helping heal and repair the world. And one of the ways of doing that is by how I respond to the things that happen. There's a saying that life and death are in the power of the tongue, meaning that our words and our actions can create or destroy. And so when you think about that just on an everyday level, when I'm walking through the world, I can be someone that's helping create some goodness out in the world. I can also behave in ways that can really create negativity and destruction in the world. So that's the primary foundation of this. And honestly, dogma isn't something I can speak much to. I haven't experienced it much in my life in the Jewish tradition. There's always been much more of a focus on how do you walk through the world.
I love that. Yeah.
And so in that way, it relates to, I mean, we're all walking through the world. So it's an open door for all of us to have these conversations. You don't have to have a particular belief in God to do Mussar. But what you need to have is a desire to take some personal ownership over how you show up, and a desire to want to learn and grow and contribute with intention, and make mistakes and laugh and take it seriously and start again and again and again.
Well, like you said, the choice, like I think that we oftentimes forget that we have the choice. If we don't bring in that awareness, then we're just reacting to any situation that comes along without really, recognizing that there's different ways we can respond, and we don't have to respond just based on kind of what our emotions may be at that time. So, yeah.
Yeah, and there's times in life when it's enough just to do life while it's happening.
Right.
And I get that. And this isn't a pathway that's for everyone. And I will say that life can be challenging regardless. So why not have some tools in the toolbox to be able to handle those challenges when they arise? And actually what I found in my personal life is that small changes can dramatically affect the trajectory of what happens.
Yeah. And I can attest to Julie's philosophy. I remember when our first son was born and I didn't want to put him in the crib. And I remember I confided to Julie, I said, it feels like prison to me. It looks like prison. Why would I want to put my son in a prison? She said, your prison was my freedom. Right? She always has a way of making me look at life differently. Or I said, I practice spirituality. I don't necessarily want to say I practice Judaism, even though Kabbalah is a Jewish mysticism. But she said, you belong to a tribe. And her saying that you belong to a tribe made me feel so anchored and so supported. So Julie has the beautiful gift of making you shift your perception with just her being who she is, like the archetype of nurturing and forever seeker. And Julie, I want you to lead us through your journey as being a mother of twin boys, whom I love very, very much, to you really redefining what Mussar is in this modern age.
Mm, mm. Okay, how long is the podcast?
We're good. We're good.
Okay. Okay, so before I had my kids, I went to Nepal for a pre-pregnancy trip and travel, and I got my first taste of mindfulness there and meditation. And when I came back, I did a couple courses in mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, and that was a really excellent thing to do before getting pregnant. And the book we read was Full Catastrophe Living. And I didn't know what that meant until I had twins. And then I continued with my mindfulness studies and then was raising twin boys. And as I did that, our children are incredible teachers. And so I would do these practices of being very present in the moment with whatever was happening. If I was holding them in the middle of the night, I would say to myself, I'm holding my baby in the middle of the night and we're breathing together. And it would just bring me into the present moment. So I did this over and over and over again as I was raising them, and I would start doing mindfulness practices with all kinds of things. I wasn't able to sit on a cushion. What I was able to do was bring my awareness into the present moment. I'm washing dishes. I'm so grateful that we were just able to make this meal. We're out in the yard, and I'm so grateful that we can be playing outside, that we live in a place that is safe. We are breathing fresh air, clean air, or swimming in clean water. So all along bringing that kind of mindfulness awareness to my parenting. And then also I started getting involved more into my Judaism. And there's a group called Aleph, which is Jewish Renewal. And they offer a really amazing conference called a Kala. And there I started learning more about Jewish mysticism. So I don't leave things behind. I just start bringing them along. So the mindfulness in the present moment then got merged into my learning more about Jewish mysticism and about a four worlds approach to being, involving the physical and the intellectual, the emotional and the spiritual, and that all those worlds coexist at the same time. So wow, bring that into the present moment. And let's be clear, there's also on the ground parenting going on. So that's actually incredibly grounding. I think sometimes in spiritual practice, there can be a tendency to lift off and lose track of this earthly life and the realities of being here. Does that make sense? And so parenting is grassroots humanity. And so being able to do that and at the same time continuing to grow. When I got back from my first Kala, I was thinking about how much I'd love to lead a women's spirituality group. There's a traditional Jewish holiday for women on the first of every Hebrew month. And within a couple of weeks, I was asked to lead a women's spirituality group. And so that grew and grew over time. And bringing into that group, we would do learning with each other every month for like an hour, something in Jewish spirituality. And then we also would check in with each other. And I shared with the group how to do compassionate listening. So this was very exciting that there was a Jewish women's group that practiced compassionate listening and that practiced Jewish spiritual learning. And the group has grown to over 50 members, and I've led it for 18 years and just passed the baton this summer to 2 wonderful new leaders. And what happened is I was leading that group, then men and people of all different genders were saying to me, we want a group like that. It's building community, and you're talking about meaningful things. And so I approached our rabbi and I said, I would like to lead a human spirituality group, something for all people, non-gendered. And he said, well, I'm interested in doing this work called Mussar this year. And since my background is in facilitation and I had done quite a bit of facilitation with the Jewish community, he said, we're going to do a launch and we'd like you to facilitate a group of people that would be studying and practicing Mussar. And when he presented this to our community, to our congregation, there were about 80 people that responded immediately. They'd like to join a group. So there's something there, right? So what, at a time when people are not so engaged in their traditional institutions that are providing, I don't even like to call it religious space, but like community space, because Judaism, I think, is so much more than a religion. There's so much more to it as being a people, and language, food, culture, music, all of that. But there was something about this that captured the interest of so many people. So why? Because people are looking for meaning and connection, and they want to reconnect that spiritual umbilical cord to their tradition. And but where do you go? Where do you go when certain kind of traditional avenues just aren't places of deep connection? So what happened is this vad, which is a Hebrew word for a group or a meeting, a vad is a Mussar group of about 10 to 12 people. In these small groups, people started getting their needs met. They were reconnecting with Jewish wisdom that was practical and relevant. They were having meaningful conversations in community. And the learning was helping them create personal transformation in their lives that was leading to more joy and more peace through awareness. And so as that group continued, word of mouth started to spread. We have a really beautiful Jewish community here in the Twin Cities, and we have a high level of engagement. I think about 40% affiliated with congregations. And word started to spread that there's this thing happening that people should check out. And it's called Mussar. And so I was asked to lead a training because I had done some facilitator training in my professional life. So I did a facilitator training for some clergy and leaders. Then they started leading groups. Then I kept leading groups. And eventually there were enough people that had been studying and practicing for a number of years that I said, hey, would you like to become a facilitator? So then this group, I trained a group of 12 that was clergy and also not clergy to lead groups. And then I continue supporting them, and I go and I grab curriculum and I make curriculum and I find things and connect with some different organizations that provide materials. And it's just continued to grow and grow and grow. So yeah, and the last piece I'll add to that is that every time I wonder where it's going to go next, when I ask that question, it shows up like the next day. And I've just learned over time to really trust the process. It's amazing to me. It's an incredible gift. And it continues to unfold, and I continue listening to what people want. So there were a few people that said, we'd really like to do a podcast. So we've been working all summer long, and the interviews are taking place in my house, and a podcast is going to start. And well, it's starting already. You know, it's been very grassroots. And now we have hundreds of people here that are participating in programs. And more importantly, they're participating in this inner life experience that's helping them contribute in the outer world in a more meaningful and positive way. And so, you know, when we create change, the way it impacts people is just, we can't measure. We can't measure. I mean, I look at what you two are doing, even right now, like we can't measure all the ripple effects that come from this. But what I'm experiencing here is that we now have like 10 organizations with Mussar programs. And I've just been contacted by more. Hey, we want to do a teen program. Can you help connect us to something with teens? Hey, we're going to start doing this practice with middle school kids. And it just keeps growing.
A tool like this for especially like middle school and high schoolers, like I think is, I mean, it's wonderful when we talk on the adult realm, but I just look at what, you know, our children are faced with, and to have something that's based in such like a mindfulness and awareness and connection and community is so needed. So that's wonderful.
I was going to share with you, one of the Jewish values is Lador Vador, means from generation to generation. So we're bringing something from our past generation into our present generation and with our future generation. And in that way, we're linking our whole history and our people, or the tribe, as you mentioned, Noah, we're bringing it forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you talk about more of the core concepts of Mussar?
Sure. So one of them is, as I mentioned before, that we are a holy soul. So in our core, there is goodness, and we see that in babies, right? They're just these pure souls.
Mm-hmm.
And so we know that in life, as we grow, some of that light that's just radiating from us as babies, there's some clouds that can start to form and block the light. And some of those are incredibly practical and necessary. And some of them end up there for our protection, and they help us get through and survive difficult things. But at a certain point in life, we have an opportunity to start thinning some of those clouds that no longer serve us as well. And so one of the core concepts would be that idea of that holy soul within, that then we have the ability to cultivate our traits, so these different character traits, in order to allow more of that to come through within measure. So measures are really, you know, if I work on the trait of love, I'm not just going to become this blissed out love being, because that's not going to be the best way for me to go through the world. What I need to do is do it within a certain measure that works in different situations at different times. So another core concept is shlemut, so wholeness, that this inner work is not because I'm broken. It's because I'm moving toward wholeness. Can you feel the difference between those things? Like broken is so full of shame, right? Like, and I messed up or something bad happened to me, I feel broken. So sure, we have parts of ourselves that are really hurt. We may have parts that are broken, but I'm not working on this in order to fix them. I'm working on this to be in my wholeness. So moving toward wholeness. And then another one is hitlamdut, which is it's the self-reflexive form of the verb to learn. So it's, how do I teach myself? So if you're in a group with me, I am not the teacher imparting to you wisdom on how to change. What we do is we study together about patience. And then the question is, Noah, how does this show up in your life? Where do you want to work with this trait of patience? Brooke, what about you? You know, we're all on our different journeys in life, but I'm pretty sure we all need to work on patience a little bit. So in what way? Now, patience is interesting because you can have too much patience and be passive, or you can have not enough patience and be kind of on the edge of rage. So what level and measure of patience is important? So I would say those are a few key concepts of Mussar. Oh, one more really important one is self-compassion.
Mm.
We really need to do this with self-compassion. And I think with I know you study many, many different personal growth modalities. And so I think this may be across the board, but if I don't have self-compassion, I'm just going to undo my practice. I need to understand that I'm doing my best, and I hold myself accountable. So it's compassion that's loving, and then I also hold myself, it's loving accountability, right? So self-compassion is both. But I just I need to, and we encourage everyone to really approach themselves through a lens of self-compassion, because there seems to be a huge abundance of self-criticism in this society right now. And so
Amen.
yeah.
True.
So and then we can offer that to each other. How wonderful.
Yeah, exactly. The more that we practice it with ourselves, and the more we can extend that to others as well, for sure. Well, and I love how you mentioned going back with your twins on how, like, with all the mindfulness and the spirituality, it's one thing to have that, but then like something like parenting is very grounding in that you're in the trenches. And I think that that's just, how we can look at our personal development, personal growth in general. Like it's like lovely to be at a retreat or at a yoga class or and it's like, yes, I'm feeling the love I'm feeling, but the second we go home and, our kids are having a breakdown or, whatever else, it's like, it's one, finding that awareness of how you can respond, but also bringing in the self-compassion if you don't respond in that way, or it's so I love how, you brought that up, that it's very much a practice. It's not like learn this and you're good. It's an ongoing practice.
And life is so full of practice. So when I'm practicing, there might be the idea of this essential goodness in people and this holy spark in people. How do I treat the cashier? So I go to the grocery store, it's possible to go through and never look at the person, right? I just deal with my little tap my credit card and thank you, whatever. Do I really pause to look at this person? Do I smile at them? Do I acknowledge that they have this whole life? Their identity is not based in my interaction with them. They have their whole life there. Who's in front of me? So even something as small as what I might call a cashier practice, it makes a difference, because can I wake up in that moment and choose something differently? Yes, my phone's going off, I'm busy, I'm running to the next thing. There's a person right in front of me. And it's when I stop and acknowledge that person, there's so much that can happen in a simple exchange it's just that we're doing this life together. See people. That's kind of a basic. But it's also very possible to go through life and not do that. So it's at home with our beloveds and with our closest people in our life. And it's also how we move through the world. It's in how we drive. It's in, I would play a game with my kids where if someone cut us off, we would say, okay, who can come up with the best reason? Like, what's going on with that person? So I could get really mad at them. But we'd say, oh yeah, they're going to the hospital for this, or they're racing off for this, a really important thing where we're like, good luck.
Yeah.
It shifts how I go through the world. And it also can be in some, those all sound like kind of pithy things, and sometimes it is. And then the more it's like bushwhacking a trail through the woods. The more you walk the same trail, the more the path gets established. And that's where this gets even another level of interesting, because this is really in scientific convergence with neuroplasticity, that the neurons that fire together wire together, and we're building new habits of being.
So
Yeah.
powerful.
So it can start with something on one level, but the ramifications of that can be at a very deep transformational level.
Well, and not even for yourself, but like you were saying with the cashier, like if they were having a bad day, or, you don't know what they had coming from, and for them to see that you see them, or, just a smile, even like talking about the ripple effect that, it's impossible to measure, but by you putting that energy out into the world, that's reflecting back in those people receiving that energy that you are.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And you said something before about self-compassion. I only realized how self-love is something that we all could use work on. Um, for me specifically, I'm always like so good at giving, even, as a clinician, giving and, attending to someone else's needs when they need to. But I always say that 3 years ago, I started putting myself on the list. I call it the list, because we don't really put ourselves on the list. And that means, what am I doing for myself today that will bring joy, that will bring this, I called her my old self, but it will bring that youth back in, that will make me feel so happy. And of course, my kids make me feel happy and my husband make me feel happy, but that is not what does my soul want me to do today? So for me, I went back to dancing because that always makes me feel so happy. So instead of feeling guilty about taking time away from the family, I feel great that I'm actually allowing myself to thrive and then come back even better than I was. So that's something we really have to be cautious about and really pay attention to, that self-love. And now I teach that to the kids. Love
Yeah.
yourself first, love your soul, love yourself, depend on yourself, and then share it with others. So it's a really important point.
Well, sure. Sure. I mean, they're watching you and they're
Mhm.
learning from you. And there is one of the traits that we work with, which is kavod, meaning respect or honoring. And there's a piece of self-kavod where if I say that, and I would invite everyone to put this within their own language. I'm going to use some traditional kind of Jewish language, this idea of B'Tselem Elohim, that we are each made in the image of God. So it goes back to that idea of that in deep holiness or essential goodness inside of us. Is that just true for everyone else except me? And if I'm going, then I'm challenged to think about, what does that mean in relation to myself? And I have been in groups with people that, really struggle with looking at themselves in the mirror, really, seeing themselves and being able to honor themselves. And it's a practice. So one of the pieces that's essential in Mussar is to have a small, doable, really easy practice where we set ourselves up for success. We know we can set ourselves up for something really big that we won't accomplish. It's actually, and I'll say this for me, for sure, it's harder for me to go, what's something I know I will do every day and I can actually make it super doable and I will tick it off my list every single day. And so with coming back to that self-kavod piece and what you were talking about, Noah, it's how do I build that practice? How do I build that muscle in self-kavod? And there's a place where then, though, I don't want to go seeking that from other people. I'm not going to go chasing after Brooke and Noah to give me accolades and make me feel good about myself, right? Because when I have that inherent sense of inherent worth, then it's kind of a quiet, grounded knowing And from that place, then I can take care of myself without any shame or blame, and just see it as an essential part of everybody's well-being. One of my teachers says you care for yourself and other people enjoy the overflow.
Like that.
I would love for you to speak on, because I know your twins are a little older now, or, past where, like, I've got a 3-year-old. So, I'm always wanting to find ways to connect her in that deeper way, like with herself, and that awareness and cultivating that. And I do believe, and and you've said some of this yourself, but, even just how we are, speaks volumes to our children. But just with raising twin boys, like, how do you feel you've been able to cultivate that? Or is there anything specific any tips?
Okay,
Yeah.
tips for parents. What kind of tips for parents? All right. It's actually, and Noah knows, it's a huge passion of mine. I have loved being a mom, and my twins are now 21 years old. And so a few things. One, I think it's really helpful to name emotions, so that to help build a vocabulary for the inner life. So when kids are really little, to be able to say, I think what might be happening is this, and to help them identify what's happening and to ask questions. And I think an inherent respect for kids is so important. When I worked with a lot of teenagers before I had kids. And the ones that would speak positively about their parents, I would take them aside and say, okay, what's going on in your house? What are your parents doing? And it came down to two things. And these are two midot, two character traits that we actually work on in Mussar. One is trust. So really building trust, that you're trustworthy as a parent. So you do the things you say you're going to do. And that doesn't just mean all the promises, but it also means follow through. So and that, with correction or discipline or however you want to look at it, that you are trustworthy. They know what to expect from you. And then the second one was respect. And that goes back to that midah of kavod, of honoring and respecting. And that can be shown, as you can imagine, we could talk about that like in just a myriad of ways. And talking with your kids, how do I show respect to my kids? How can they show respect to me? And also showing respect for myself, and them showing respect for themselves, but building a language around those kinds of concepts. So I think those are some very helpful things to do. And then one of my mentors said, show your kids who you really are. And so I'm fallible, highly fallible, wholly human, kind of those two things. And there's all that merging of those two. So apologize. I make mistakes. I learn. I share with them what I learned, what I'm sorry for, and how I want to do differently. And I'd let them know what I'm working on. And then having language like, I can tell I'm becoming impatient, so I'm just going to take a few minutes, and I'm going to go walk over here, and then I'm going to come back. So then if I didn't catch myself and I ended up getting impatient, getting really frustrated, come back and say, here's what I learned. This is what happened. This is how it felt in my body. And this is how I acted. I'm really sorry. And I don't want to treat you that way. And this is how I'm going to work on that in the future. And so I think those kinds of things, just starting to normalize language around being, and then just realize it's our own practice too. I'm sure there's more. So we'll have to do a second podcast where I can really think about it. Because someone just recently said to me, they're like, okay, write a book on parenting.
But I think there's such huge, there might be little details within this, but just the respect and trust, two big pieces that really comes down to any sort of human interaction that we should have or should. And so oftentimes I think as parents, we think that it should be different with our children, but in many ways, you know, it's those basic things.
There was an interview that has stuck with me that I saw so many years ago, and I believe it was the author Angela Davis, and she was in an interview with Oprah Winfrey. And she said, "What does your face look like when your children walk into the room? And do you smile at them? Or are you looking at them because they're dirty or they're messy or they didn't do something? Like, how do your children see you looking at them?"
Mm.
And then that we can extend that to partners, we can extend that to friends, but becoming aware, and this is actually what's so exciting to me, is that this goes back centuries in Judaism. It's called the radiant countenance. And it's not this fake thing of like, be really happy all the time, but it's what do we offer people from our face? Because it makes a difference, and so that's just something I think a beautiful small practice to think about that has very deep reverberations is what does my face look like when my kids come into the room? Because maybe I'm stressed out and I'm busy about something else, and what they see, they're going to take as how I feel towards them, even though it might be how I'm actually feeling about work, right? So it's just cultivating awareness and realizing that there's little things we can do along the way that can help make things a little better for everyone. And in those moments, those are holy spark moments, when we're just or bringing in some light. And I know the word holy can freak people out. So, like, if that's not in your vernacular, then don't use it. I get it. Like, it's something that is familiar to me, but I use it in a way that's so different than kind of contemporary typical American language. So let's just call it a spark. Let's just call it a spark moment, And also, like, we're doing our best. So bring in the self-compassion, like we're doing our best. I know a lot of parents are trying so hard. They want to do everything just right. And the bringing mindful awareness into our lives is a huge first step.
That's true. So many jewels there. I love that. Any more questions, Brooke?
No, I mean, I think the beautiful thing in speaking like of all these different practices and different ways that you can look at the world and practice your own self-growth and awareness, like they all have these threads that are there, and self-compassion and just that spark of awareness and the ripple effect. Just there's so many gems, and that's what I love about doing this podcast, is that we speak to so many people, and it was beautiful hearing all about Mussar and your experience in raising twins, but it's just seeing those like threads of truth that weave through everything, and it really allows things to sink in on a deeper level. That there's that's the guiding light right there.
I would say for anybody that's listening that feels like this is still kind of a nebulous broad brushstroke, it's important to know that that's why there are groups that have a specific pathway of guidance. I really look at it as a compass. And I do leadership groups, and we actually call it use the compass as a metaphor. And so, for example, we would work on the trait of humility for a couple weeks. And we work on the trait of patience. We work on the trait of respect. We work on compassion, generosity, gratitude, anger, a variety of different traits. And so by connecting, that's why we have groups, because to take it on all alone, like any practice, can be really overwhelming. And so being able to be part of a group that helps guide us is really helpful. And what's been happening here is that our groups stay together for years at a time.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah, that's
What a
amazing.
what a great blessing it is. You grow together.
You do grow together, and now we're getting the whole community of these groups. Last year we had 17 groups, and we had a gathering where people from all 17 groups came, and people are going, I didn't know you were doing Mussar. I didn't know you were in Mussar. And then they have this shared language. So maybe they're on a committee together somewhere, or maybe they decide to collaborate in a business together, or maybe they want to be in a parenting group together. And we've had parenting groups that are exclusively focused on parenting through a Mussar lens. So there's just there are these affinity groups that form around this body of work, and it's so fun when we do it together.
Yeah. And I
Just
think it's
curious
important.
Oh,
Go ahead.
well, if someone was interested in joining a Mussar group, do you know if this is something that is all over the United States, or is it kind of stayed in kind of certain areas, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it does exist in a lot of different cities. There's also online groups. You're certainly welcome to reach out to me through twincitiesmussar.org. And I can help connect people to different things. Some of the leading national organizations would be the Mussar Institute, the Center for Contemporary Mussar. There is the Inside Out Wisdom in Action, where they focus on Mussar for social change, specifically focusing on racial injustice and anti-racism. And there are lots of different things going on in different communities online. And sometimes you have to dig around a little bit. I've also talked with people who have trouble finding a group that they really connect with. So again, we're in this resurgence of this movement. We're riding the crest of a new wave, and it's really exciting. And so maybe someone's listening and they want to start a new group. So let me know. And we can talk about that. And I try to be like an umbrella for everyone, all the groups happening locally. But then I also do have feelers out there in other communities as well, because the more of us that can connect with each other, it becomes this web, which is really what you're doing through your podcast. And you're highlighting people who are doing all kinds of different meaningful work in conscious living. And the more that web can interact with itself, the stronger we all become.
I love that.
And we can all create positive
well
change. Yeah.
And we'll put it in the show notes, like we'll put the Twin Cities Mussar s.org in the show notes, so you can reach out to Julie and see what else, what amazing work they are doing together. So Julie, thank you so much for being on our podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's really an honor to be here with you. And Brooke, it was great to meet you. And Noah, it's always wonderful to get to be with you.
Yeah, with you as well.
Julie, yes.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.